Welcome to Rebuilding LA After the Fires. I'm Jan Bresky, and in this podcast, I explore how Los Angeles recovers from the recent devastating wildfires. In each episode, I sit down with developers, community leaders, and other real estate professionals to uncover what it really takes to rebuild homes and neighborhoods. If you're looking to understand what's next for LA, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, this is Jan Bresky, and I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Geoffrey von Oeyen. Geoffrey, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. Great to be here with you.
Geoffrey is both an award-winning architect, and he's also on the faculty of the USC School of Architecture. And Geoffrey, I know that you have multiple connections to the fires in our region, not only the most recent ones, but earlier ones as well. Why don't we start out with your background and then a little bit about your connection to the fires that happened about a year ago?
So I had the opportunity to design a house for my brother in Malibu several years ago, and it was shortly before the Woolsey Fire in 2018. We, of course, had no idea that was going to happen. We finished the house, and he got his certificate of occupancy and the insurance for his house Halloween of 2018. And at that time, he moved his stuff in, and the Woolsey Fire happened 7 days later. And we had total loss of that house. It ended up on the cover of the LA Times, and it was really, really devastating. It was a moment where we'd put years of work into this project and lost it, along with huge swaths of the neighborhood where I grew up in Western Malibu. And we had to really think about how to restart, how to rebuild, what that looked like. And my work took a real turn toward resilience and thinking about how we're going to design for wildfire and a changing climate in the future.
Got it. And what sort of cut to your most important message? If our viewers only capture one thing from this interview, what would you want them to capture? And let's say whether that would be people affected by these fires, people that live in other fire impacted areas, which is a lot of Southern California, and or elected officials. What's sort of your overarching most important takeaway message?
The most important takeaway is that this is the future. This is the world we live in. Before, fires were a rare thing that impacted a small group of people on the fringe of society. We thought of this back when Mike Davis wrote about it. We think of this as something, oh, those people had that experience. It's really impacting our city of Los Angeles. It's impacting all places of the world, as I've been talking to journalists all over the world, different places experiencing wildfire, changing climate. We have to prepare for that, and it's something that doesn't just affect folks on the wildland-urban interface. This affects folks in cities where buildings burn from building to building. It's an urban problem, and we have to confront this as something that's part of our future, how we think of neighborhoods, how we think of insurance. And to folks who have suffered through the most recent fires, to give them the hope that they do have agency, that they can participate in doing something that will transform their lives for the better and for the future. And it's a really difficult time, because I just remember how difficult it was for my family.
Yeah. And let's assume that our viewers accept what you're saying as reality. But what can we actually do now? And I think that on one hand, we have the fire zones themselves and how we rebuild them, what needs to change. And then secondly, we have all the other zones that didn't burn but have equal fire risk and just got lucky this time. And what are we supposed to do in those areas? And again, let's make this, I want to cover a lot of territory because you have a lot of interesting background, and I think this overlaps with not just the fire zones, but there are other questions as well about housing that I'd like to touch on. So if you could just tell us within the fire zones, what are the changes, given that this is our new reality, that you see as essential?
Well, one of the things that I've discovered that's really great is there are organizations like IBHS, who are major insurance group, doing systems like Wildfire Prepared Home. And they're looking at how we can actually rebuild in ways that are much less likely to burn, far more defensible, far more resilient. And there are tools out there, there are ideas, everything from how we treat the site design and treat the landscape, how we build and actually organize the architecture, to the details and the materials that we're using to approach that. And I think there are a lot of tools out there. We don't have to keep building in the same ways. And I think that is huge. And for all of the difficulty it is to find these new ways to build, there are also insurance opportunities in doing that in ways that we're starting to see insurers look at the way people build and think, if I'm going to insure this thing, I want to know that it's going to last and it's going to be there in the future and it's a good bet for me. And if I build it to these standards with these materials, I can, with some reliability, know that that's going to be there after the next wildfire comes through. And I think that's very important. I think that we have the opportunity to do that now. And to your other question, I think folks who have houses that did not burn and they missed this one and they were safe, I think it's really the opportunity to look at existing houses and how we can be better prepared with our backyards, with our landscape, with our exterior siding, with our vents, with all of the things that, we know how to create defensible space. We know how to harden the exterior of houses, and there's ways that it can be done. And I think it's a really important moment for people to consider that.
Yeah, I would think that the insurance companies would have an incentive to sort of help homeowners harden their houses and avoid a huge loss, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You'd think there'd be some rate reductions, and you would think that there would be some opportunity to get policies you otherwise might not have access to. And it seems like insurers are becoming smarter in the way they're handling this. So it seems like insurers are looking at these problems and saying, hey, maybe it's just not a binary thing, or it's not just a simple checklist, but maybe we can actually look at the design of this project and we can actually see how it addresses these issues in a way that we could, look at our risk as a result of that, and we could give this person a break on their insurance, or we could cover them where other insurers may not because they don't have the tools and the ability to do that. And I think those are exciting prospects in the future right now.
What about for our elected officials? What's your message for them?
I think for our elected officials, there's a lot of really important opportunities right now to help people who are, they've lost everything in the fire. How can we provide the tax breaks and the tax incentives for them to get back into their homes? How can we help with permitting? How can we help to do this in a way that's efficient and quick to help them? And at the same time, they should be studying, as I know many are, looking at how we can plan cities in smarter ways, how we can build with better materials and better techniques, and do that. I hope that elected officials are looking at ways to incentivize that. In the same way, if you want to put solar on your roof and you want to get some sort of tax rebate, or you want to get that paid for in part by the state, why are we not seeing incentives to build resilient houses that not only protect folks and their individual investments, but protect a whole community? I think now is the time we should see elected officials offering folks the incentive to do that, because that's the investment in the community. That's the investment in the future.
Okay. So, and specifically, can you get into just one or two of the details of, we've talked about hardening houses, we've talked about incentives, but let's get into a few nuts and bolts, just so people know exactly what you're talking about. And what are you referring to when you say we need to harden these houses or change the way that we develop or change the way that we build neighborhoods? Of course, Southern California is pretty much built out at this point, so we're not designing brand new neighborhoods generally, but I want to get down to one more level of detail. Now's your chance to speak directly to people that are interested in the rebuilding effort.
Yeah. I've been really fortunate to be part of a program called Case Study Adapt. It's a nonprofit that was formed by Leo Siegel and Dustin Bramall. Dustin lost his home in the Palisades fire, and both he and Leo are advocates for architecture and good architecture and for the communities that they help to create. We've looked at several prototypes for new houses, and we're working with clients. So there's a group of 10 firms working on this project. And we just had a big exhibition at the USC School of Architecture that I did with my students, and the firms worked with our students to do that. And we also just did it at the Eames House. We just took it to the Eames Foundation and just showed it there. And the Eames Foundation's been very active working with us. In that, we've been looking specifically at IBHS. So this thing called the Wildfire Prepared Home. It is a checklist. You can go on ibhs.org. You can find these materials, and you can go through whatever standard of home preparedness you want to look for. So if you have an existing home in a yard, you can go through the checklist of how can I improve my chances of surviving a wildfire. And there's a lot of information in there, just a ton of detail, everything from how we address the landscape, how we address the sides of our houses to, the eaves. How do we protect the eaves? If we have a ventilated attic, how do we screen for that? How do we protect from embers getting under doors or around through windows? These types of things. Lots and lots of information there that you can do. And then the next step is building a new house, starting from the beginning when you have the options of what to do. A lot of things where you can get the highest standard of certification, the plus designation, you can start building a house that has materials that are known to not burn and to be resilient in a wildfire situation. So for instance, I'm working with 2 clients on houses as part of that program. And we've designed houses that use a product called RSG 3D. And we've been working with Ken Caligar, who's the CEO of that company, and looking at ways in which the RSG 3D can be implemented in lieu of other trades where you might have had stick frame construction and you might have had a traditional way of building up walls and framing the way most houses are done. And they're creating insulated panels out of EPS foam with all of the steel reinforcing members woven through that foam, creating tension surfaces, sort of skins on either side of this foam that get shotcrete to create concrete insulated panels across the entire project. So you have this essentially a composite wall system that's going to be totally resistive to flames. You can put a flamethrower on the thing and burn it in the thing, and it's just concrete. You have 1.25 inches of concrete or something on either side, inside and out. It's not going to burn. And so that part of the work is wonderful because we're looking at some new ways to build that are very, very sustainable and resilient. Very low waste in the processes that they're doing, very quick labor, ways that we can, not only be great for fires, but we don't want to be blindsided by earthquakes as well, being great for that, handling that sort of thing. And so building in these resilient ways, if you can get the cost, close to what you would do a traditional stick frame project for something like that, but you have this added bonus of being resilient in that next disaster. What a wonderful thing, not only for the homeowner, but for the neighborhood. You're not contributing to the spread of fire in the future with that. So it's a great thing.
Yeah, these neighborhoods that did get burned in the most recent fires are probably going to be the safest neighborhoods for the next 50 years because they're being built with all the knowledge of the best practices that we've gained recently, right? Whereas all the neighboring neighborhoods that haven't been burned are the ones that we should be worrying about.
Yeah.
And so people need to check out this Wildfire Prepared Home, and we'll put a link to that in the notes to this interview. What other questions should I be asking you that I haven't asked you that are important as relates to rebuilding after the fires?
I think there's so many questions that folks have in this process. And I think for folks, there's so many families that I know, just in the sense of recently in the Palisades fire, my son lost his school, at least part of his school. They're going to be moving back into it, lost his theater. There's so many families that have been impacted that all wonder, should I rebuild? What's it going to be like in the future? What will the neighborhood be like? Will it be the neighborhood that I remember or that I grew up in? And I think there's a lot of well-founded fear that people have right now about, should I go back or should I move on and go somewhere else? And I think that the folks who are rebuilding and working to rebuild that sense of community and that sense of place find it to be a very empowering process in a way, because in a way it's sort of revisiting the trauma that you've experienced and being able to say, no, that trauma is not going to have the better in the long run. I'm going to come back and I'm going to make a difference, and I'm going to actually come back to this community, and I'm going to build this thing that doesn't make up for it. But in the end, you might end up with a better house. You may end up with a safer community, as you mentioned earlier, Jen. And I think that when you finish the project, like when my brother finished his house, he felt a real sense of accomplishment. Like, I've come back to this neighborhood. I've rebuilt something that was very, very hard. I did this very hard thing. And frankly, it's very meaningful to him as a life experience. And I've read and heard from a lot of folks who have gone through that process, that going through that situation, overcoming it, rebuilding, people feel a great deal of confidence after that. It's like a transformative, life-changing experience to go through and do that.
I'm going to switch gears for 1 minute before we wrap up and ask you about a different issue, which is affordability and attainability. The most recent disasters, of course, are the biggest disasters in decades, but the affordability issue is almost it keeps getting worse. It's not something that sort of flashes and
Yes.
and we have to deal with it. It's just year after year, it's grinding away, and it's really affecting the state of California. I think it's affecting young people's sense of can they stay here and can they raise a
Yes.
family here? So what are your thoughts on that as an architect and as an educator in architecture? Do you have, I know it's a giant topic to sort of drop at the end here, but do you have any quick thoughts that you can share on affordability and how and whether there's any hope for that in the future? Because we have to both be fire resistant and also have attainable prices.
Yes. Yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, that is what is preventing folks from rebuilding. Even if they got over the questions of, should I move back or should I do it? It's, can I, and do I have the ability to? And it's really, really hard. I think we found people are largely underinsured, like across the board. I mean, there are numbers out on it, but the number of folks who can afford to rebuild is relatively small. You've got a lot of folks who have, especially if they're retired, they have their house paid off and they may have let insurance lapse or are not well underinsured, really struggling in those ways. And just as you said, costs continue to go up. They're not seeing any break in being able to do that. I think my hope, and I think it's not just mine, I think a lot of folks who are working on this problem are hoping that with some of these new technologies, like I'd mentioned, the RSG 3D, and there are others, with contractors and subs out there who become more confident working with these new materials, if they could, ultimately scale this up, do this at scale, you're going to reduce the amount of labor that's required. You're going to make it actually simpler to build, faster to build, and hopefully reduce labor costs overall and reduce the cost of building, or at least give some stabilization to that, assuming those things scale up. But right now, if you only got a few people doing it, of course, there's a lot of lead in and a lot of startup and a lot of figuring out. But as more people are rebuilding and they're building resiliently, we're going to have a lot more tools and a lot more ability to do that. And we're not going to be stuck in this same game of just simply doing the stick frame construction the way we've always done it, always dependent on certain wood material prices, always depending on certain labor practices, that hopefully we can streamline some of that. I think it's a structural, material, systematic thing in that way. And that's, of course, outside of insurance. And that insurance problem is a whole other problem in and of itself. But in theory, if you can insure houses that are less likely to burn, that when they do succumb to fire or there's a problem in that way, people are fully insured for the value of their home at that time in rebuilding. And that's a whole other problem in and of itself.
Yes, there's a number of different directions one could go from there, but in the interest of time, I think that's a good place to pause. I want to thank you, Geoffrey von Oeyen. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Rebuilding LA After the Fires. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend or neighbor who might benefit. Be sure to check the show notes for links and resources I mentioned today. And join me next time for more important insights into LA's rebuilding efforts.